European countries vowed Friday to send billions of dollars in further funding to help Ukraine keep fighting Russia's invasion, as a U.S. envoy pursued peace efforts in a trip to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin amid growing questions about the Kremlin's willingness to stop the more than three-year war. According to Associated Press, Russian forces hold the advantage in Ukraine, with the war now in its fourth year. Ukraine has endorsed a U.S. ceasefire proposal, but Russia has effectively blocked it by imposing far-reaching conditions. European governments have accused Putin of dragging his feet. Russia has to get moving on the road to ending the war, U.S. President Donald Trump posted on social media. He said the war is terrible and senseless. In Russia, the Kremlin said Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff was meeting with Putin in St. Petersburg. Witkoff, who has been pressing the Kremlin to accept a truce, initially met with Putin envoy Kirill Dmitriev, footage released by Russian media showed. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Witkoff during his visit to Russia was discussing efforts to end the war with Putin and other officials. This is another step in the negotiating process towards a ceasefire and an ultimate peace deal, she said. After chairing a meeting of Ukraine's Western backers in Brussels, British Defence Secretary John Healey said that new pledges of military aid totaled over €21 billion, a record boost in military funding for Ukraine, and we are also surging that support to the frontline fight. Healey gave no breakdown of that figure, and Ukraine has in the past complained that some countries repeat old offers at such pledging conferences or fail to deliver real arms and ammunition worth the money they promise. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte said last week that Ukraine's backers have provided around $21 billion so far in the first 3 months of this year. European Union Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said Friday that more than $26 billion have been committed. Ahead of the contact group meeting at NATO headquarters, Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov said a key issue was strengthening his country's air defenses. Standing alongside Healey at the end of it, Umerov described the meeting as productive, effective and efficient, and said that it produced one of the largest packages of assistance Ukraine has received. "We're thankful to each nation that has provided this support," he said. Britain said that in a joint effort with Norway just over $580 million would be spent to provide hundreds of thousands of military drones, radar systems and anti-tank mines, as well as repair and maintenance contracts to keep Ukrainian armored vehicles on the battlefield. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has renewed his appeals for more Patriot systems since 20 people were killed a week ago, including 9 children, when a Russian missile tore through apartment buildings and blasted a playground in his hometown.
The Russian Tu-22 M3 bomber, which was described in the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky, could have been destroyed by the Defense Forces at Dyagilevo military base in Ryazan or at the Shaikovka military airfield. Aviation expert Valery Romanenko said this on Radio NV. Oleksandr Syrsky said that Ukrainian forces successfully struck a Russian Tu-22 M3 bomber with a drone several days ago. A few days ago, our successful actions destroyed a Tu-22 M3 long-range bomber. It had just landed when our drone hit it. The cost is about $100 million, Syrsky said. In particular, Valery Romanenko said that the 52nd Heavy Bomber Aviation Regiment of the Russian Federation was relocated from Shaikovka to Mozdok. This is approximately 15 to 16 heavy bombers Tu-22 M3, and the enemy uses these aircraft in strikes on Ukraine. As Romanenko noted, Mozdok is a considerable distance, approximately 700 to 800 kilometers from Ukraine, even in a straight line. In his opinion, the plane that Syrsky spoke about could have been hit by the Ukrainian armed forces at the Dyagilevo military base, which is located in Ryazan, or at the Shaikovka military airfield, which is in the Kaluga region of the Russian Federation. Most likely, they all flew from Shaikovka because it is too close, about 300 kilometers from our territory. and in Diaghilevo there is a repair facility where these planes are repaired. Perhaps one of the planes flew there for repair, for maintenance, and they took it out there, because in general, in the Russian Federation, are few such airfields where these planes are based. The choice is small: Mozdok, Diaghilevo and Tchaikovka, and we cannot reach the Olenia airfield, unfortunately, the expert said. He added that according to Russian and international sources, as of early 2022, the Russian Federation had about 60 such bombers registered. In total, these are 2 regiments, one of which was based in Tchaikovka. According to the expert, 2 aircraft were destroyed, 2 were crashed by the Russians themselves, and another was damaged. And as of now, about 10% of the fleet is out of action. According to Romanenko, these planes are already living out their days. They are outdated. The Russians themselves say that with every technical accident in the air, at least 1 crew member dies. Recently, there have been 2 disasters, and in both cases, 1 pilot died. Even the emergency escape system does not work properly. He added that other Tu-22M3 components are also problematic, in particular the variable geometry wing. According to Romanenko, these bombers will not be modernized because there is no point in doing so. The Tu-22M3 is a supersonic, long-range strategic bomber with variable sweep wings. It was developed by the Tupolev Design Bureau in the 1960s and manufactured between 1978 and 1993. Even if Russia uses Chinese volunteers and the latest developments, the Ukrainian army will be able to hold off the enemy for as long as necessary. While the Kremlin throws new resources into the battle, Kiev responds with modern technologies, effective defense, and loss of minimization. This is not only a fight for territory, but also for a principle. Ukraine fights smart and wins time. At the same time, Russia's losses in manpower and equipment are colossal. The Economist writes about this. Last month, the Russian army pushed Ukrainian forces out of part of the previously captured territory of the Kursk region. To do this, Moscow deployed elite brigades, North Korean troops, and even new weapons, fiber optic drones, the control of which cannot be jammed. But then again, there was a stalemate. The fighting moved back into Ukrainian territory, but attempts to break through quickly petered out. The head of the Sumy Regional Military Administration, Vladimir Artyuk, said that the Russian assault groups that crossed the border had already been destroyed. Russia already tried to take Sumy in February 2022, but was pushed back 6 weeks later. Today, the city is being fortified again. New trenches, bunkers and defense lines controlled by the SBU are visible behind the checkpoints. But despite the escalation, Sumy lives. As Artyuk notes, the city's population has even increased since the beginning of the war. The number of displaced persons who arrived is twice as high as those who left. In the first 3 months of 2025, Sumy Oblast was hit by 8,925 drones, bombs and missile strikes. This is more than twice as many as in the same period last year, but there is no panic in the city. Military analyst Yuri Butasov is sure that Sumy is too well protected for Russia to capture it. Butasov believes that Moscow's current goal is to take control of the hills on its side of the border where Ukrainian troops are still stationed. This would allow the Russians to use drones more actively and push the Ukrainians out of the 10-kilometer strip, creating a buffer zone. Such a move would allow them to redeploy forces to the Donbass, Putin's key strategic goal. Residents of Sumy and Kharkiv have no illusions about a quick truce, but remain calm. Life must go on, that is the mood. In Kharkiv, despite the blows, pensioners dance in the city centre every Saturday, continuing a tradition that has lasted for more than 10 years. Meanwhile, in the east between Kupiansk and the Russian border, fighters from the Typhoon drone unit are noticing a lull. no offensive is expected and they are preparing to redeploy to Pokrovsk. The unit has begun using its own fiber-optic drones just a couple of months after the Russians introduced them. According to Commander Mikhail, drones are already making the front dangerous for any equipment and infantry. This allows holding positions with fewer forces. If 6 months ago the Ukrainians feared a gradual rollback, today the defense has become stronger and the technology smarter. In more than 2 years of full-scale war, Russia has made almost no progress. Ukraine has learned to fight in a way that minimizes losses while preserving manpower. A peace agreement is not yet in sight, but Ukraine is relying on itself and is not retreating.